I would love to I'm going to turn it over to the panelists now, and if we keep moving, we can have time for questions. Asking each of them from their respective agency, what is your agency doing with respect to precision medicine? What are the challenges that you face? And how can innovation help resolve those challenges?
I'm Elaine Johanson. I'm with the FDA. I'm in the Office of Chief Scientist, and I'm the Acting Director for the Office of Health Informatics. And our agency, of course, you explained, is safe and effective products. Our biggest challenges have to do with these large biological data sets which are coming in, the evolving science in omics. We have to be able to collaborate with industry. We want to collaborate with experts around the world. We want to be able to exchange these large biological data sets. We want to be able to do analyses on them. So there's many things that we need to do with these data sets, and they're increasingly coming into the FDA. Some of the issues that we have are, for example, that industry is sending us hard drives because they can't get the data sets in. So those are some of our challenges at a very high level. But also our scientists and reviewers have to keep up with this evolving area of science. They have to keep up because if it's going to be safe and effective, they have to understand how to review that. So one of the innovative things that we have been doing to spark innovation and also to engage people from around the world is Precision FDA. And that's a project within my group. I'm the program manager for it. And it is a collaborative, high-performance computing environment in the cloud, and it is outside the FDA firewall. And we've built a community of about 3,000 people who are experts in this area from around the world. I encourage you to join. It's a high-performance computing environment, so if you want to do analytics on the environment, you can. We've also created an FDA protected version of that through we have FedRAMP certification for the platform it sits on, which is DNA Nexus, and the portal, which we have developed. We have FSMA moderate, so we can deal with data securely. And we've recently developed an interactive review tool that allows our reviewers to collaborate with industry during the review process. So we're starting rolling that out with CDRH and CVM this spring. And we also have project areas so that you can collaborate with FDA on specific activities, scientific analyses, et cetera, in that environment. So we're not necessarily having to mail these data sets in. So that's an area of innovation. Of course, there's still the issue of pulling data down and into FDA. So that's definitely an area of challenge. But it's all very exciting, and I hope you will consider Precision FDA as some place you're interested in looking at.
Hi, I'm Alastair Thomson. I have the honour of serving as the Chief Information Officer at the National Heart, Lung and Blood Institute at the National Institutes of Health, which, as Erin said, is the world's largest funder of biomedical research. Precision medicine requires knowledge. It requires knowledge of biological processes, of your genetics, how everything fits together, how your environment plays into it. Coincidentally, NIH's primary mission is to generate knowledge. But knowledge doesn't just come straight from data. Knowledge requires a lot of input from people. And so I'll talk a little bit at one of our major programs, the Omics for Precision Medicine, TopMed. Over 1,000 investigators now are working on the world's largest, most ethnically diverse whole genome sequencing data set in the world, 155,000 people and counting, to identify what are the genetic patterns that go with disease? What are the indicators in your genes of progression of disease? Even diseases that we think of as being driven by environment, so COPD, for instance, which is primarily driven by smoking. There are genetic components of COPD. There are different subtypes. Those subtypes require different treatments. People will respond better to some treatments if they have a certain genetic makeup. When Francis Collins finished sequencing the human genome in 2000 at a cost of about $3 billion and involving tens of thousands of people, by the way, we can sequence a genome now for less than $700 and it takes about a day. When he did that, we didn't really understand what the DNA was, what it did and how it interacted with the environment. We knew that there were the letters, the A, T's, G's and C's that you probably hear about on science shows on TV, and that misplacement of those can cause problems. So cystic fibrosis or sickle cell disease are caused by a single letter out of place. And we thought that was pretty cool. Now we know what we need to do. But it turns out every time we sort of peel the onion of genetics, it gets more and more complicated. Did you know that your DNA changes through your life? If you're a smoker, the DNA, the pieces of it that actually encode proteins, get turned on and off by the smoking behaviors, by the chemicals that go into your body. And so precision medicine isn't just now about understanding that sequence of DNA. It's about understanding your environment, the exposome, we call it, the exposures to environmental chemicals. And this is driving the need for even more data. TopMed is currently 3.1 petabytes of data. That's technically called a whole lot of data. It has to be in the cloud, there's no other way to do it. But we now want to link those data sets with environmental data sets from the EPA for exposure. Those data sets are also very, very large. And so one of the areas where we're actually looking for industry to innovate is in how to bring those data sets together in a good way. Our data is clinical. It's come from patients who are participants in clinical trials. Each of them has consented to use of their data for science. Those consents are very specific sometimes. Sometimes they'll say you can only use it for cardiovascular research or lung research, or maybe you can use it for anything. But those consents are at the core of the trust there is between researchers and the patient. And so one of our big challenges is how do we share data and make it all available in a way that respects those consents? Because if we don't, the difficulty of enrolling patients in clinical trials will grow exponentially. And so this is where industry can play in. Technologies like blockchain are good candidates to be able to protect and put control of those consents and that data back into the hands of patients. We've got some big challenges with a lot of data. I'm very encouraged to hear my colleagues and what they're doing. And that as we pass on the knowledge that we generate, it's going to turn into real treatments for real people.
Great. Good morning. My name is Sue Lin. I'm a Quality Division Director at the Health Resources and Services Administration. I'm going to shift gears a little bit because Alastair talked about interventions. Where we sit at HRSA, our strategic goals are to improve the access of high quality primary care in underserved communities. Also with the goal of enhancing population health and health outcomes for those in underserved communities. So our health center reach in 2017 was 27 million patients across the country. That translates into 1 in 12 Americans, 1 in 9 children, 1 in 3 living in poverty, 1 in 5 individuals who are rural residents. So the patients that we serve experiences social determinants of health, whether it's evidenced by geography or socioeconomic status. And so our mission is really trying to figure out how can we address the health disparities, and that's why the interventions and the data mining is so critically important. The reason why we started the Advanced and Precision Medicine Initiative at HRSA in the fall of 2018 really was, I think folks around DC will know, the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2018 that came to our agency included an allocation for health centers to encourage health centers to play a role in engaging their patients to participate in the NIH All of Us research program that has a goal of enrolling 1 million patients. They had previously, in 2016, done a pilot with 6 of our health centers and had been really, really successful in seeing how the trust that our health center primary care physicians and primary care teams have built with the patients has enabled recruitment ratios of between 1 to 4, 1 to 5 outreach. And also, our Bureau has been investing in patient-centered medical home transformation, which is a lot of the foundation for this patient-provider trust that has been built throughout the last decade. So I think, our goals, is to support the NIH All of Us research program, but we also see a lot of the benefits of the health IT optimization that is needed through this project to be able to help our health centers be an active participant in it, with the promise and hopefully the vision of interventions that are tailored for our health center patient population. So I think our funding of $25 million that went out to 46 health centers. So we have, over 1,400 health center organizations that are our grantees. We selected based upon NIH dialogue about the types of attributes that they're looking for in our health center organization. So the 46 that we selected touch about 3 million lives, 1 million children, 2 million adult patients. We're hoping that through this next 2 years of project that we'll fully support NIH's All of Us research program, but then also address some of the health IT challenges that are out there. So I think the two health IT approaches that we're looking at exchanging patient data, one is Sync for Science. I don't know if folks are familiar with that. That's really leveraging a FHIR API. And I think there's been a first phase of engaging EHR vendors like Epic, eClinicalWorks, and Cerna. And then phase 2 will be engaging other EHR vendors, which are all part of the top 5 EHR platforms within our health center unit. So we're looking for all those types of innovations that could come from that health IT engagement.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm not from UVA, but one of my colleagues is, so we're very happy that he's going to buy pizza for everybody. So I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to participate at this meeting. I'm very excited to see everybody caffeinated and ready to ask questions. So at the VA, I'm a clinician, so I'm an end user of all these advances that we've had, in precision medicine. I like to think of precision medicine as slightly separate than what I call personalized medicine. I usually tell my patients we don't treat cancer, we treat patients who have cancer. And I think that's very important to realize that because, I know we've talked a little bit about bots and a little bit about informatics, and we need to talk about more abilities to, integrate and interact with our patients. But at the end, you still need to have a conversation with your patient, and perhaps your patient needs to educate you as well. I know several of my colleagues, for example, in New York, when their patients come to see them, they have the latest article in New England Journal of Medicine that I even didn't get a chance to read it the night before. So and we have some of that at the VA. We have some challenges at the VA. Not everybody, for example, has all the ability and the desire, perhaps, to be informed of all the realities, in terms of management of their disease. But we're clearly evolving into an area where we really have improved. Certainly, I call myself a senior hematologist-oncologist, or perhaps I should call myself a hematologist-oncologist who is a senior. And so I've seen in my career, significant. It's really, I must admit, I envy the young people coming into the field today because our field has changed spectacularly. I'm really very excited. And so our ability to figure out what patients have in terms of molecular mutations, how we can address some of those mutations, that's really, driving, medicine. How that's going to impact 10 years from now, I'm still not sure. I know that we have a lot of work to do, in the areas of informatics, in the areas of genetic testing, in the areas of basically addressing, how we can treat, those particular mutations. And obviously, as we realize, even with the new technologies, I'm sure many of you have heard about the CAR T cells, for example, that cost $475,000 and change. And fortunately, we're now finding out that not everybody, gets cured from those therapies. So of course, one of the important things for us is how do you identify the individuals who really get a benefit from that, so we can provide personalized and precision medicine care, in a healthy and economically viable model. I think that's one of the big things. The VA has two things that are very important for us, from the point of view of research. Certainly one of them is the Million Veterans Program that many of you have heard, which basically is taking blood from individuals who care to donate and storing it and allowing, later investigators to come in with projects. They're going to look at sequencing, particularly those individuals, by whatever the new modality in NGS, next generation sequencing, whole genome sequencing, et cetera, to look at characteristics that may help us identify particular disease and things like that. And perhaps also, identify particular characteristics in those patients that would allow us to intervene earlier. One of the things that I like to think about it is, as doctors, yes, we treat sick people, but it would be nice if we can address, a lot of the issues before people really get ill. And I think what's interesting right now is we go into the medical literature and you're seeing the ability to identify individuals who may be, respond differently to whatever, is affecting them, such as, their diet, their exercise, smoking, drinking. Different individuals, as we heard before, not everybody that smokes gets COPD. So the question, obviously, for us is going to be, COPD is a terrible disease with, significant economic questions and problems. And so how do we identify those individuals? How do we identify then strategies that, to intervene ahead of time to prevent the development of the diseases? What the VA is also doing in the hematology-oncology area is contracted with Foundation Medicine to provide, sequencing. And so we're going to, have the ability not just to test the tumor, but what's interesting is that with the advances in computational genomics, et cetera, we can perhaps these days take blood out of an individual and look to see whether the blood contains the cancer cells and what mutations exist in that blood. How can we then, intervene in a more efficient way in those individuals? So I think, in between, sort of early diagnosis, and basically, basic research, from the Million Veterans Program to a more, focused approach in treatment for individuals, looking through the Foundation Medicine genomic sequencing. Those are the two major programs for which the VA right now is approaching, the care of the patients. And I think, as I was listening to the panel earlier, the question, for example, is going to be very interesting. How does precision medicine and personalized medicine, going to exist in the next 10 years? And I think that's a question that I'd like all of you to think about it and, help us address that issue. Because, as people said, millennials and I think younger people, have a different view of medicine, and perhaps they can teach us some things that certainly, we need to, how can we improve, the approach to, health in the future.
I see that our timekeeper is there. Despite the best of intentions, I wanted to leave time for questions, but I think what we'll have to do is take questions in the break. So please come talk to any of us during the break. Thank you so much to the panelists, and thank you to ACTAC for having us here.